You can call Lincoln Riley a lot of things, and I'm sure USC fans could be very creative on what they want to call Lincoln Riley right now. But should we call him just a better version of Scott Frost?
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
I want to make sure that I make this crystal clear right off the bat. Lincoln Riley is a much, much, much better overall head coach than Scott Frost ever was or ever will be. But there are parts of what USC is looking like right now under Lincoln Riley that reminds me of the demise of the Scott Frost era at Nebraska. Remember, there are some similarities, I think, between these two head coaches and what they really emphasized within their program. I should use past tense, emphasized for Scott Frost. Of course, these are both offensive coaches. Scott Frost was the offensive coordinator at Oregon when they were humming before he became the head coach at UCF. And then they had their undefeated season, and then he became the head coach at Nebraska. And these are teams that just overall lack physical toughness on the interior. And overall as a football team, they just lack that physical and tough mentality, which I think contributes to what I'm going to talk about in this commentary. When we start to compare Lincoln Riley and what's happening right now at USC to what happened in the Scott Frost tenure at Nebraska, the first thing that I want to start with is between the ears. It's the mindset. Now, Matt Leinart talked about it on Twitter after the game when he was flying back to the game. He talked about lacking that killer instinct, lacking that toughness, lacking that mental toughness, lacking that mindset to be able to put teams away. When you're ahead by 2 touchdowns against a team like Maryland, you put that team away. But I look at the mindset from the other side of things. When you start to lose close game after close game after close game, it doesn't always mean that you're close to being a good football team. It means that this mindset is creeping in that somehow, some way, this team is going to find a way to come up short in a game that is close. When I'm watching USC games now, based on what I've seen throughout the season, you look at the close loss to Michigan, you look at the close loss to Penn State, who's a number 3 team in the country, and then you look at close losses to Minnesota and Maryland. You're losing close games to teams at all sorts of talent levels. And that was the thing about the Scott Frost era, specifically that 2021 season, when they lost close to teams like Oklahoma and Ohio State, just a 3-point loss to Michigan. That's, I think, kept what was the Scott Frost believers and the optimists saying, look how close we are against the Michigan Wolverines, a team that won the Big Ten championship that year. Look how close we are against a team like Ohio State and Oklahoma, which were really good football teams in 2021. But there's that, but they weren't blowing out, certainly. They weren't blowing out some of the lesser teams on their schedule. And you're seeing that this season with USC. Look, you take Penn State to the absolute brink. You look really good coming out of the gate. You lead 20-6. But when we talk about that mentality that Matt Leinart talked about, the lack of the killer instinct to put teams away, to be able to finish football games, that's what you're looking at when you're looking at that Penn State game. And that's when you're looking at all of these games. They led in the fourth quarter of every single football game that they have played this season. And of those losses, they have found a way to come up short in those particular football games, like Nebraska did when Scott Frost was the head coach over there. So it starts with me watching this. I think, well, USC's ahead in this game. How are they going to find a way to come up short this time? It creeps into the fans' minds. And all of a sudden now, if it happens time after time after time, it starts to creep into the locker room a little bit. And that is not good as a program when all of a sudden you do this time after time after time and nothing seems to change. That's where I want to go with my second point. When we go to the Scott Frost era, one of my first videos ever on this channel, I was talking about the 2019 Nebraska Cornhuskers. And the title of the video was Nebraska should have been 8-4 in 2019. So it started then, and you saw the same issues in 2020, you saw the same issues in 2021, and you saw the same issues in the beginning of 2022. You look at Lincoln Riley, And you see what you had defensively with Alex Grinch those first 2 years. And it took Lincoln Riley longer than anticipated, longer than it should have for him to make a change at the defensive coordinator position. Now, it looked very good. In the first game against LSU, it looked like things were changing a little bit. But now, as we kind of dive a little bit deeper into the season a little bit, you're seeing the same type of stuff. You're seeing like what Billy Edwards was able to do, guys getting open for Maryland and the coverage not being very good. You're seeing missed tackles, even with the new defensive staff. And now, look, I understand not having Anthony Lucas, not having Eric Gentry, even losing Barry Alexander up front of the defensive line hurts a little bit as well. I understand that, and I get that. But you're seeing the same type of issues. You're seeing the same type of culture and mentality across multiple seasons with Lincoln Riley's USC that you saw with Scott Frost's Nebraska Cornhuskers. One thing I want to finish on talking about USC before I get into some potential options for the Trojans is they don't have some elite players to save them. You look at that first year where they started really good and made it to the Pac-12 championship game. Of course, they had Caleb Williams at quarterback. They had some other good transfers that they brought in that season that certainly helped them in spite of what the defense was. And then you look at last season, a 7-5 season where Caleb was able to make plays where the offensive line wasn't great. The defense was certainly the defense. I look around at this Trojans team. They don't have elite players to step up in these big-time situations to save them. I saw a lot of nice things early in the season for USC, and I thought that they were looking very good early in the season, and one guy that I said really nice things about was Miller Moss. But here's the difference between Miller Moss and Caleb Williams. When the pressure was breaking down and you needed to make a play, Caleb Williams could get outside the pocket, and he had the arm talent, he had the mobility to make all of those plays. When the pressure gets in on Miller Moss, you see where his arm talent certainly doesn't stack up with the Caleb Williams of the world. When things really start to break down and get off schedule, that's when you see the valleys and the hills and valleys of the skill set of Miller Moss. Look, and then you have these young wide receivers. Look, do I believe Jacoby Lane can be a great player eventually? Yeah, he could be. Zachariah Branch, I don't believe, has lived up to expectations. I believe Deuce Robinson could be really good. I believe that Quentin Joyner could be really good if, I don't know, USC focused on getting the run game involved a little bit more. But when I look around this team on offense and on defense, considering the culture, considering the mentality of this team, they don't have elite players to save them this season. And I think that's really affecting the way that this team looks on the football field right now. Now, what are the choices for USC? Let's get into that. To me, I think that there are three choices for the Trojans. The first one, and I think if things continue to go south, I said this is probably the one that athletic director Jen Cohen, who did not hire Lincoln Riley, by the way, I think that this is the most probable option that Jen Cohen could go with, is taking away some of the power that Lincoln Riley has. When Lincoln Riley was hired and they backed up the Brinks truck to bring in, for Mike Bone, to bring in Lincoln Riley to SoCal, they gave him a lot of power to run the program his way. They could do a Jim Harbaugh 2020, Scott Frost, here he is again, 2022 type of situation where they amend his contract a little bit. Now, Lincoln Riley can just say straight up, yeah, I don't want to do that. But they can do other things if it's not contract related to kind of chip away at some of the power that Lincoln Riley has right now on this football program. He could hire an offensive coordinator. They could hire a general manager, right, to take over more roster building and roster management type of things as well. Just those types of little things, so Lincoln Riley doesn't have as much power and control over this football program. You saw what happened with Jim Harbaugh in 2020. You saw what happened with Scott Frost. Those are two examples. One went one way, one went the other way. Certainly, I'm not sure if I foresee Lincoln Riley agreeing to an amendment in this contract right now. So to me, it's these staff changes, I think, that are most likely if things really go south for the Trojans this season. Option number 2, Lincoln Riley leaves for the NFL. How does Lincoln Riley feel about managing a big-time college football program right now? We saw what Chip Kelly wanted to do. He wanted to leave for an offensive coordinator job either for the NFL or in college, which eventually what happened, of course, with him landing in Columbus, Ohio, at Ohio State. Like Cliff Kingsbury, who did not have much success at all being the head coach at Texas Tech. Okay, he got the head coaching job of the Arizona freaking Cardinals. So I think it's safe to say that Lincoln Riley, if he wanted to, could be an offensive coordinator in the NFL. And I think that he could be very successful as an offensive coordinator in the NFL. You look at what he's been able to do developing quarterbacks and now how they're performing at the NFL level. I think NFL general managers and executives would look pretty favorable on that he could come into a situation as an OC and he could do pretty well with an NFL offense. And I think that kind of fits him, and I think the style of what the NFL is over there, I think those two could mesh together. Once again, it all depends what Lincoln Riley wants. Option number 3, you flat out fire the guy. This is probably the least likely option in all of this. I'm going to compare this buyout for Lincoln Riley, which is standing-ish around $70 million right now, to the buyout of Jimbo Fisher. Was a record buyout, $77 million. I think Texas A&M, they got that oil money. I don't think USC financially could swing this. But let's break it down, this buyout for Jimbo Fisher and what it looked like. They basically paid a down payment. They paid $20 million up front, and then they are paying Jimbo Fisher $7 million per year over the course of the next 7 years. Does USC want to do that? Do they want to get those deferred payments? Now you're paying Lincoln Riley $7 million a year not to coach USC football. And then on top of that, you bring in a new coach that's, maybe around $7 or $8 million. Do you want to pay $15 to $16 million in your head coach budget every year? I'm not sure if you do. The boosters pulled a lot of strings and backed up a lot of cash to get Lincoln Riley to USC, right? They paid for his houses. They gave him a private jet. The football facility that is being built right now at USC, Lincoln Riley is very much involved and was very much involved at the design of that facility. So the USC has invested a ton into Lincoln Riley. Right now, that investment is not paying off. I'm not so sure that they would be so quick to pull the trigger to get rid of Lincoln Riley right now. Let me just say that. This is a situation where you kind of put your hands up. If things continue to go in the wrong direction for USC, it's going to take a while for them to maybe catch up to their West Coast brothers in Oregon that are doing things really good. That machine is absolutely clicking right now in Eugene, Oregon. One other thought that I want to leave you with. How different would things be if USC could have closed the deal in the transfer portal with Will Howard when he was on campus visiting this winter? Would they have won some of these games? Yeah, maybe they would have. But all we can sit here is talk about what if and the hypothetical. I want to hear your thoughts on all things Lincoln Riley. What about the comparison to Scott Frost? Boy, I never thought when I started the season that I'd be talking about Scott Frost again. It's kind of giving me the heebie-jeebies just mentioning that name on this channel again. So give me your thoughts on that. Give me your thoughts on everything Lincoln Riley and USC right now. There's a lot to talk about. Trojans, you just got to keep on fighting on through this process. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.